Welcome to College Football Monday, a Sons of Saturday live show brought to you by Jack and Coke. I'm your host, Pete B. I've got Sam Jesse here with me. Sam, how you feeling tonight?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good. It's been a busy Monday. Happy to talk some football. It's bowl season, one of the most chaotic, I think, months of the college football calendar.
Yes. And we got a Hokies Bowl announcement. This is our national show, but we are going to be doing a heavy dose of a Hokies update around 8:30 p.m. because there's a lot of portal news going around, Sam. There's bowl news. There's all kinds of stuff that we can talk about and dissect. So we will get to VT Corner around 8:30. Before we can do anything, though, and get to the championship games, can you give us a cheers?
Yeah, my cheers is to the wild wackiness of transfer portal. Look, it sucks seeing some of your guys go in the portal, chase the bag. Maybe they want more playing time. It sucks. But guess what? You're going to get guys back. Take it in stride, calm down, just embrace the craziness. We'll see what the roster looks like in a month or so.
Cheers, buddy. Yep, and we already got a couple people hopping in the chat. Make sure you join us here. Hokie 95, floodgates open with the portal. And his second comment here, please don't talk about the SEC crybabies. Oh, we're going to talk about them, but only to make fun of them, not to commiserate with them. We are going to get to the playoff field. I want to talk a little bit about these games first. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you're here with us. More blowouts than I anticipated on championship weekend, Sam, because the spreads were pretty tight, and we had talked about picking the games a bunch, and I thought it was an extremely hard weekend to pick the games in terms of just having an edge.
Yeah, I did too. I thought Friday had a little bit more of the edges with, Boise State at home over UNLV. It was only a 14-point game. Army blowout over Tulane, though. And then you look at, some of the other ones. Jacksonville State absolutely rampant over Western Kentucky in that one. Marshall rampant over Louisiana. Ohio demolished Miami of Ohio, excuse me. So a few really close games, but also a few blowouts, which I think can be expected, especially some of the lower conferences where you have a team playing at home or injuries, stuff like that.
Yeah, there were some great games on Saturday in the SEC and ACC title games. SMU is in the playoff field. Alabama is out, and that's part of the tease, but we'll get to the field in full. But most of you, if you're watching, already know that SMU made the playoffs. So with Clemson winning the conference, SMU getting in, that does make us a 2-bid league, something that it went from 3 to 1 to 2 when it came down to it over the past couple of weeks. So
there's cheers.
Cheers to just the conference getting a little bit more money, because that's all that means.
Cash that check. Yeah. Cash that check.
And there is growing money as you move through the playoff too. So it would be nice if one of the ACC teams got to the next round. But we'll talk about some of those upset possibilities later in the show. The coaching carousel is spinning, Sam. Purdue hired Barry Odom. Good hire for them.
Yep.
It's hard to win at Purdue, but if you're going to try to do it, that's a good guy. He comes over from UNLV. He had made them a winner after basically never being good. Like they've had so few good seasons at UNLV, and he turned them into a contender.
Yeah, immediately too, with a really fun, he's a defensive guy, but had a really fun offense, the fun and gun. We'll see what that translates like to Big Ten play, though. UNLV did struggle against the better defenses they played. So we'll see how that translates to the Big Ten.
UCF rehires Scott Frost. And one of the more interesting ones of this cycle, it's cool, right, that he gets to go back and do it again. I am hoping that it goes better than Nebraska. Obviously, he was great the first time around at UCF.
It's like a Hallmark Christmas movie. The high school couple that rocked the small town, went their separate ways. Now they're getting back together. We'll see if it works out. I kind of hope it does. It's fun when UCF is good.
Yeah. Bronco Mendenhall heads to Utah State. He would rather coach at New Mexico and now Utah State than coach in Charlottesville. So that's my note on that move.
A slight step up, I think. Utah State's a big school that has been successful in athletics before. And in fact, I think they've had in the last decade, maybe decade and a half, they've had 3, maybe 4 10-win seasons. So a place that you can win with maybe a few more resources. So an interesting program to watch with the current playoff structure.
For sure. Ohio head coach Tim Albin heads to Charlotte. This is a really good hire for Charlotte.
It's a great hire for Charlotte. I don't get it for Albin, though. Charlotte is miserably down in the dumps in terms of resources. Maybe he just wanted to get out of the MAC. I don't know, but this is a really interesting one. Great hire for Charlotte, though. One of the best program builders in the country.
Charles Huff heads to Southern Miss. I want to save some of the thoughts on this. Huff just became a champion of the Sun Belt at Marshall, and now he's heading to Southern Miss, which I would view as a downgrade, but I want to get your thoughts on it in a little bit, Sam. Former North Dakota State head coach Matt Entz will lead Fresno State. This is a sneaky good hire, too. It was weird when Entz went from NDSU to USC, I think it was, to be a linebacker coach, but now he's heading up a pretty solid program in Fresno.
And a program that's headed to the Pac-12, the new look Pac, whatever it's going to be. I don't know, but interesting because, again, that's another program kind of similar to Utah State, maybe even a little more, that's had success in the past, has some fan support. Interesting hire.
This is for just local ties. App State hires Dow Loggins, South Carolina OC. People in our region like SC. They like, App State. I know we got a lot of North Carolina people that follow the Hokies and things like that. I think it's a good hire. App State has a long football history of pretty much always being successful, no matter who the coach is. So I think this is a good hire for them.
Yeah, and especially when your arch rival in Marshall loses their guy who they just won the Sun Belt with, getting someone who kind of made something out of nothing at USC with that offense. It really does feel like a good hire for them. Again, how good is his offense if Lenoris Sellers isn't just trucking over people? We'll see.
They had some playmakers on offense for sure, and Sellers got so much better. I assume it's pronounced Loggins, but it looks like Loggins.
I think it is Loggins.
West Virginia and UNC are still open, although there are some candidates. You got Rich Rod potentially going back to West Virginia. You got Bill Belichick talking to Pat McAfee today about maybe going to UNC. Bill Belichick, Sam, in college football. You're on mute. You muted.
Let me check. Sure, I'm on my
mic. I think you're on your other mic.
You can talk while I get that.
Yeah. So, but he was on there talking about it. He's like, if I were to take it, I would, it would be a professional program. It would be a pipeline to the NFL. And I can't deny the fact that I'm sure some recruits, every kid knows the name Bill Belichick and coaching Tom Brady and New England Patriots and championships. It would have to attract talent to a point. But at the same time, he's not a college coach, and he doesn't necessarily know how to deal with college kids, although a lot of the guys that get to the NFL sometimes are only 21 or 22 years old. So I just think it would be a very interesting fit, but I do think he'd be able to attract talent.
It's weird. It's weird because he is someone too, and you look at why he was so successful in New England. I mean, he had Tom Brady, but also it was the Patriot way. Everyone do your job. No one's bigger than the team. It was very regimental, very hard-nosed. How will that go over in the college game? We've seen coaches try to do that in the college game, and it doesn't work. How is that going to go? I also think I'm sure you mentioned this while I was reloading. Credit to them for getting younger. He's a year younger than Mac Brown. That's huge.
I actually didn't say that, but that's very funny.
Yep. 73 year. Like,
why can't UNC get a young up and coming coach? Like, why can't they get Tim Albin?
I'm going to assume that there is something internally in their athletic department. I think their
board of trustees has an issue, right? Like,
well, you look at it when they've done those hires, they've all turned out horribly.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
but at some point or another, like, I'm going to be plain and simple here with you. Like, Charlotte made a better hire than Chapel Hill if they hired Bill Belichick. Like,
yeah, probably. Probably. I mean, Bill Belichick without Tom Brady wasn't out here
He wasn't
competing
great
for playoff spots. So
he coached 2 different teams without Tom Brady, the Browns and then the Patriots after Brady, and neither one were very good.
yeah.
All right, and
Interesting.
as for Rich Rod, like I don't know. I mean,
That'd be
that's
so
like
fun. Do it.
I just it's fun. If I'm West Virginia, I don't think I want to go back to the well again, especially since he burned you so bad the first time.
Yeah, I also think there is a bit of grasping at straws, maybe. I mean, that's a program that financially isn't doing great. Their athletic department as a whole is an absolute dumpster fire. But financially, they're not doing great. They're in a league that does not suit them, doesn't have any of their rivals, ton of travel costs. They haven't been a perennial winner in a while. Tough place to recruit. Like, they're not a very attractive spot for coaches.
No.
So you might have to go to some, you might have to get a little creative with it or go back. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like
I mean,
he's an
so
alum and he's coaching at friggin' Jacksonville State right now. Like West Virginia is a pretty nice upgrade, and he won at West Virginia before, but that
Jimbo
was
Fisher.
In a completely different era, like of college sports when he won the first time.
Jimbo Fisher.
Oh, Jesus.
West Virginia native.
Another West Virginia guy. Yeah. I just don't do that. Like neither of those guys, like what Rich Rod I could get behind. He did just win a title. He clearly has coaching chops, but it just seems like you're just doing a retread. And like, I don't know.
James, you're absolutely correct. I believe UNC Field Hockey did hire a girl who like had just graduated from UNC Field Hockey to be their head coach.
Nice.
So you are correct there.
So
but a football hire and a field hockey hire, even at UNC, are a little bit different.
All right, let's get to these games, Sam, because I want to get through a couple of these before we do VT Corner. In the SEC, Georgia outlasts Texas in overtime, 22-19. This was a pretty sloppy and boring first half, in my opinion. There were penalties, there were drops, field goals only. It was 6-3, Texas at the half. Georgia couldn't do anything on offense, and Texas couldn't capitalize early and get touchdowns instead of field goals. They even missed a field goal in there. Then you have, missed 2. You're right. Mm-hmm. And then Carson Beck gets hit right before the half, and it looked pretty bad. Looked like it was a serious injury. Gunnar Stockton has to come in, and he provided them a little bit of a spark. UGA put up 10 points in the third to get it to 13-6. They kicked a field goal to go up by 3 after. So they went up 13-6. Ewers brought them back a little bit, but then he had his own issues with some interceptions. Georgia has a lead and the ball, and Stockton throws a really bad interception. And so then Georgia is on defense, and Texas comes down, ties the game. And now I'm thinking Texas is going to win. And I had Georgia plus 2.5. And I'm thinking I'm going to lose. Texas is going to win, which I don't really care about, but I'm going to lose the cover. And lo and behold, it goes to overtime. Texas kicks a field goal on their first possession. Georgia gets the ball, and ETN did the rest. They score. They win 22-19. And it was a great game, and like it doesn't do it justice to sum it up like this, but I thought for Georgia, not only was it the defense, the fact that they had 15 tackles for loss, but it was ETN in the run game and him being able to make just enough explosive plays for them to win.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, offensively, Georgia does not look good. I know Texas is probably the best defense in the country, but they just don't look good, whether it's Stockton or Carson Beck or whoever. Like they don't seem to have that fluidity and explosiveness that we saw. Yet again, too, for Georgia, 2 fumbles in a row. They recover them both. They have fumbled the ball 20 times this year and only lost 5. That is absurd. I can't believe that. And it's won them. I mean, it allowed them to stretch the lead in the Tennessee game, and it won them this game because if they don't recover those 2 fumbles, they don't get that touchdown. And Texas probably just sits on them for the rest of the second half because they weren't able to do anything outside of that drive. So I don't want to say lucky from Georgia. I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt. And I also think Texas, in a way, lost this game. When you miss 2 field goals against a team like Georgia, it's going to be tough. But also Sarkisian and his game plan, it felt like other teams have given the blueprint on how to beat Georgia this year. And Texas just kind of ignored it. I mean, how many times did Texas just run the ball up the middle and get stuffed for 1 yard, 0 yards, negative yards?
Yeah.
It feels like Texas had a lot of wasted plays, and that really hurt their offense. And Quinn Ewers, it's like every 3 or 4 throws look unreal, and then the other ones are very pedestrian from him.
I mean, you're watching him at the end of that game, and I'm just waiting for him to make another mistake. And that's it sucks because he did. I mean, he passed for a lot of yards. He brought them back. But the fact that they had to kick 5 attempts at field goals, they only made 3, but they did 5 field goal attempts. We've seen this against Georgia before. You can't beat them by kicking field goals. You just can't do it. You've got to convert. And that's been a problem for Quinn Ewers. He can't get the touchdowns when it matters. And they've even turned to Arch at points to do it for him.
They should have stuck with Arch. I really do, because I think he gives them something in the running game that they don't have with Quinn Ewers. And they brought him in overtime for the first snap, and it's a 6-yard gain. And they don't go to him anymore, and they have to kick the field goal. I just think in these playoffs, you're going to see a lot more Arch Manning. I think he learned his lesson there. Yes, it absolutely did. Banks, the left tackle for Texas, consensus like top 10 pick in the draft. He's a monster. He was a game time decision. He was out. I think that hurt them a lot.
I mean, yeah. The 15 TFL is crazy. 6 sacks. Like, Ewers was under pressure. So I'll give him that little bit of mercy as well in terms of the analysis. But this is just interesting going forward, Sam, because you look at them both making the playoffs. Obviously, Georgia gets the 2 seed. Texas, are they 5 or 6? They're right up there.
They're 5.
I've got it right here. So yeah. But going forward without Carson Beck, I know Carson Beck wasn't good in that first half and has had a lot of bad moments this year. But having an inexperienced guy who they didn't think was better than Beck, and Beck has done enough to win them other games and even played really well at points. Like, I think it does lower their ceiling to not have him.
Yeah. And I would like looking at some of the advanced stats of this game. EPA per play, Texas far and away better. Success rate, Texas better. Yards per play, Texas better. Expected points added per drop back, Texas. Explosive plays, Texas. Third down success rate, Texas. Havoc rate, that was pretty even. Texas had 7 explosive plays, Georgia only 4. Everything leaned Texas. They just couldn't turn drives into touchdowns or into easy field goals. A lot of times they had that, third down, and they take a sack, and now what should have been a 35-yard field goal is a 42-yard field goal. Those are the little things that you can't do against Georgia, because even when they're not at their best, they're good enough to make you pay. Yeah. How do you feel about Georgia, though? 2 straight overtime wins in games that they weren't the better team.
Yeah. I mean,
and now they're playing the winner of Notre Dame and Indiana. So let's assume Notre Dame wins that game, and that's played on a neutral field. Notre Dame's better than Georgia Tech. Clearly, they whooped up on Georgia Tech.
They didn't have Haynes King that game, but yes.
I think you could argue they are even with Texas at this point, considering how Texas has played against some of their better competition. And Riley Leonard, very similar style quarterback to Haynes King.
I mean, yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion that they're going to play Notre Dame, but any team in this playoff that goes up against Georgia with their second string quarterback is going to have a chance, even though Georgia is Georgia. I know it, but it's not Georgia from 2 years ago. It's just not. They're very vulnerable. And now you've taken away their quarterback, who, like I said, is flawed, but I don't know if Gunnar Stockton can win a championship. Maybe he can. Maybe he does the Stetson Bennett thing and manages the game, but that interception was just enough of a doubt. Because the only reason they were able to get a lead and end up beating Texas is because of the spark he provided, and he made some plays, and he played tough, and he got his absolute jaw rocked at one point in that game. But he's not going to be coming by surprise in this next game. All the pressure is going to be on him. And I just don't know if whoever they face through the first round, I should say the second round for Georgia, then you got the semis, and then you got you got to win 3 games with Gunnar Stockton in order to win a natty. Like, that's not going to be easy to do.
I think it is very likely. I don't want to give away my picks too quickly, but I think it's very likely that Georgia ends the season being outplayed in 3 straight games. That's very likely. Yeah.
They very well might. And that's the beauty of this season. There's just a lot of teams that are not elite that are all going to be going at it, and it's going to make for a very, very fun 12-team playoff. Let's go to the Big Ten. Oregon beats Penn State in a shootout, 45-37. The Ducks got out to a fast start. They were up 14-3 and then 28-10. But Penn State, to their credit, never went away. 31-24 at the half, and that was only because there was a late field goal by Oregon to make it a touchdown. Penn State had really clawed their way back. But then they had the big TD to Tez in the third to make it 38-24. It felt like it was over, but Penn State kept fighting. Ultimately, Oregon had them at an arm's length, I'd say, most of the second half. And they were up 15 points before Penn State added the late touchdown. The problem for Penn State, and some of the problem for Oregon, was that they couldn't defend the slant, and the defense was just getting shredded by Gabriel all game.
Both offensive coordinators were just on the money in this game. And I think, let's look at the winning team side for Oregon. Offensively could not be stopped. Running the ball, I mean, they did everything from 5 wide out to I formation with 2 tight ends. Like, they were manhandling Penn State at the line of scrimmage. They were getting guys wide open. Gabriel was on the money all game. Clinical offensively. Defensively, though, Kotelnicki cooked up a masterpiece, an Emeril Lagasse bam type cooking from Kotelnicki, because they had guys running open. They figured out how to run the ball. Ketron Allen is amazing. He's so good. And I don't know where all this Drew Aller hate comes from, because he looked every bit like an NFL quarterback in that game. He refused to get sacked. I don't know how Oregon didn't have 10 sacks in this game. Aller wouldn't go down, and then he would just scramble and find his way for big yardage. The 4th down conversion that they had to get it to an 8-point game, he had a guy wrapped all around him. He's falling down, and he throws a bullet into double coverage for a touchdown. Unbelievable play.
That play was ridiculous.
That is it's a loss for Penn State, but it, in some ways, I think much higher of Penn State after that game than I did.
I mean, I didn't think they had it in them offensively.
No,
to do that against that Oregon defense. And on the flip side, does the Oregon defense have some question marks here, man?
That was the first game that's like Ashton Genty popped off a few big runs on them. That was the first game this season that an offense has really just gotten big chunk plays against Oregon. That was the first one.
297 yards rushing, 8.7 yards per carry for Penn State.
It is so weird. I mean, Ohio State didn't do this to them.
I mean, if I'm Tennessee and I'm sitting where they are in the bracket, I am licking my chops to play Oregon after watching that game.
I think you are. Now, what I will say about that,
I mean, they got to beat Ohio State to get there. I'm just saying.
They do. Could it partially be like Penn State and Drew Aller just played the best game of their lives?
It could be.
Because that's by far the best the Penn State offense has looked since Saquon was back there. And so, well, to be seen. I think it's a worrying thing for Oregon, though, because they were so close so many times. Like, Penn State converted a ton of 3rd and longs, a ton of 4th downs.
Yeah.
They had him backed up a bunch. They had Drew Aller wrapped up for a sack and just couldn't get him down. Like, they were so close. And to me, that's like, oof. If another team is playing on their game, the defensive side for Oregon might not be dominant enough to like trump that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, if they play, Ohio State and that running game is just cooking in this one, like, will it be enough? I don't know. Or if they play a Texas team with Steve Sarkisian offense, who's got a great game plan against them, and does their best win against somebody else's best? I don't know.
And that was probably Penn State's absolute best shot
Mhm.
that they could throw on offense. Their defense didn't play well, but as they could throw on offense, that's probably the best shot they could give. And Oregon still, was like the little brother with your hand on the forehead, keeping them away. Like it was never really in danger for Oregon to lose this game. And
Yeah.
so all that's being said about how their defense played, like they still won and they won pretty comfortably. And it does give me like a little bit of a different like view of Penn State. But Gabriel was awesome, man. 95.4 QBR, 4 pass touchdowns, 300 total yards. Tez Johnson, he was the one that got the yards in this one. 11 receptions, 181 because Stewart was covered, by Penn State's other guy on the outside. But Tez went off, and it was a really fun game because you kept thinking it was over and Penn State kept clawing back. I thought Penn State might be able to keep it within 3 because of Oregon having to come to Indianapolis and Penn State maybe surprising them and surprising people with their offense. But ultimately Oregon won and does look like the most consistent, best team in the country as of right now.
They have the most elite ceiling of any team. That's for sure. Offensively and defensively, it wasn't a good game, but I think you still saw some of the star power they have defensively. But they're going to have to tighten up against if they're going to win a national title. They're not going to do it with a performance like that.
All right, let me take a second to talk about our sponsor before we discuss the ACC title game. As I said at the top of the show, College Football Monday is brought to you by Jack and Coke. 2 legends, 1 can, Jack and Coke, the #1 cocktail in the world, is now available in a can at your local grocery and convenience stores. They got it with Coca-Cola Original. They got it, or I should say Coca-Cola Classic, Coke Zero, Cherry Coke. There's Jack and Ginger. There's even Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey in a mixed drink. They got a whole variety of them, but Jack and Coke is the one that you guys know. You went to college, your first drink was probably a Jack and Coke at the bar. Like that's just how it goes. So now you can grab it right out of the fridge in the convenience store, RTD, ready to drink. When you're having those Jack and Cokes, please drink responsibly. In the ACC title game, Clemson takes down SMU in a last-second thriller, 34-31. A freshman kicker hit a 56-yard field goal to win, Sam. But it really should have never come to that. Clemson was up 14-0 quickly, thanks to an early fumble and a punt return / penalty. It was 24-7 at the half and 31-14 entering the fourth quarter. So Clemson was up 17 points to start the fourth. And what do you know? SMU comes roaring back. Kevin Jennings looked like a man possessed at the end of that game.
We were this close to Clemsoning being back. We were this close. I mean, an unbelievable. I mean, it looked like SMU had no desire to be on that field. It looked like Clemson was going to steamroll them, and they did. And then Clemson just stopped at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Like they just stopped playing. Offensively, they were horrific. And defensively, it was obvious what SMU was doing, and they couldn't stop them. Yeah. And it turns out, if you look at this game holistically, like SMU kind of dominated this game. It's just they
outgained them by 130
and they had such a hole. Unreal.
And they made a lot of critical mistakes. And that's what at points this year, SMU has done that against Duke, for example, but they got away with it. You can't get away with it against Clemson. And they almost did anyway, because they tied the game with 16 seconds left. Clemson gets the kick return. And then I always find this frustrating because we saw it against us in the Liberty game years ago. They're playing off coverage. Klubnik makes a perfect pass for a 17-yard gain to get it to a 56-yard field goal. Like, I couldn't believe that pass was open for him. I understand the concept, and a 56-yarder is not easy and not normal in college football, but how does SMU give up a 17-yard pass play for Clemson's only chance to win?
Yeah, I think partially you're telling your guys nothing behind you in that situation. And you're also so drilled to protect the sidelines. Clemson had that timeout and they were able to run a guy up the middle. I believe that I believe it was McElroy. Was it McElroy who's calling the game?
Yeah.
He drew that play up before they snapped it. He said, "Look, this guy's going to go outside. This guy's going to
He did. You're right.
and
He
this guy's
absolutely
going." He was like,
did.
"This guy's going to run a 15-yard in route. He's going to be wide open. They're going to throw it," and he did. And I think it is really telling how bad Clemson played in that fourth quarter. Their inability to run the ball. Like Phil Maffa, dude, is not good. He's not good.
He's having a weird season because last year I thought he was the better running back on their team.
He was, and they just he's not good this year. They can't run the ball. Their offensive line still has issues. They sometimes during games they just stop playing offense. I'm a little bit worried about them going to that Texas game, but SMU, way to fight back. But they do make some pretty big mistakes in key scenarios. Like the beginning of that game,
it was a disaster.
We were like one or two plays away from that game getting totally out of reach. And they were really lucky to be in that thing going into halftime because it was.
Someone compared us. It was James Gilmore compared SMU to the Hokies. And it is a perfect comparison back to the 2010 Boise State game where we got down 17-0 only to come back and take a lead and then lose. Mm-hmm. And SMU was pretty similar for them. The playmaking of Jennings, though, it went a long way because this ended up being the perfect game for the ACC to get two teams in. Only a close loss, and this was the closest of close losses, was going to get two ACC teams in. And that's what Jim Phillips got. He was on the sideline talking to McElroy before the game. We got two teams in. That's what I'm most happy about that, just for the sake of the conference that we happen to be in at this moment. And so, cool game. On a big picture note of the Clemson, another title. They've now won 8 of the last 10 conference title games. FSU's run from 95 or 92 to 05. They had a share of the title 12 of 14 years during that stretch. So, but they didn't play in championship games. And so a couple of those were shared titles. Like this run by Dabo and Clemson in this conference is crazy.
Yeah, it is. And they haven't done it without any competition. I think there's been teams like this, Miami team this year. It's absolutely loaded. Heisman finalist quarterback. They didn't have to play. Top 6 in the nation the whole time. They didn't have to play them.
The Lamar Jackson teams, the Jameis Winston teams, like there's been competition, and Florida State did get the better of Clemson one or two of those years. The funny thing about Florida State's run of conference titles in the ACC, one of the years they didn't win was when Tech won in 04. And then the very next year, Tech lost to them in 05. And that was Florida State's last one for a while. I'm doing a Jim Phillips saying the wrong team names here.
He's on macro level ACC. He's got to go. He's got to go. Dude. He's so bad. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't know if he's ever watched a football game in his life. He's got to go. Just horrific leadership for the ACC. Klubnik going pro after this year.
In something other than sports? I'm just teasing. He had a good game. He did play a good game.
I don't think so. There's going to be a lot of other guys who are going to go pro that are going to be slotted above him. And I think with that receiving core, a lot of that receiving core is going to come back for Clemson. So they could have a pretty mature and explosive offense next year.
I think he could get taken, but I don't think it's going to be before like the 5th round or something.
He can probably make more money at Clemson next year.
He's only 6'2". Like that's not like the measurables aren't going to be off the charts for him. So I don't know. I don't think he has much of an NFL future. He could be in the NFL next year. And I don't know his status in terms of how many years he has left, if he can even come back next year. Let's go to VT Corner, Sam, because although there's a couple more championship games to talk about, there's a bunch of things going on with the Hokies right now that I want to get to. For one thing, we're headed to the Duke's Mayo Bowl. That's, to me, one of the best bowl games that's not a premier bowl, right? Like
Friday night, January 3rd in Charlotte. Best case scenario by a mile.
It's close to Blacksburg. It's close to where so many Hokies live, whether that's, the Carolinas or DC or whatever. Like, you could drive it. It's a quick flight. And it's a Friday night game, as you just said, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. It's fun. They do the mayo pour afterwards on the winning coach, as long as that coach is willing. I think Pry will be okay getting some mayo in his hair if we were able to win. But
Fry seems like
won't
a
have
mayo
that
guy.
problem.
Yeah.
He seems like a mayo guy. But yeah, we're playing Minnesota. Minnesota is 4.5-point favorites right now. Not that really matters, but I do think the matchup is kind of a fun one.
Yeah, I think it's a styles make fights game. Minnesota's been one of those teams that has been pretty good this year, just hasn't necessarily gotten as many of the win columns. Offensively, they've been a bit up and down. Defensively, they've been pretty good, though. So it's kind of a classic Minnesota team. They're not as good running the football as they used to be, but still pretty good defensively, very stout. I think it's a really good matchup. Now, the key to that good matchup is, who does Virginia Tech trot out there on the field?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know. I don't know.
That's a good segue. We'll do more of a bowl preview when it gets closer. But for now, let's go to the players that may or may not be on the field, because the portal is open and it's getting full, Sammy. We got 10 guys from the Hokies as of right now. Now, when I started this recording, I don't know if any more entered, but it was 10 when we started. We got 3 from the D-line and Curtis Perry, Ish Finlater, and Malachi Madison. We discussed those guys on the last show, I believe, because they had already expressed their intent. Today, we learned about Kelly Lawson. We learned about Jalen Stroman and Mose Phillips in the safety room, Lance Williams, Xavier Chaplin, Gunnar Givens, and Braylon Moore from the offensive line. And running back Malachi Thomas also is entering the transfer portal. You hear all those names. Who hurts you the most in terms of hopping in from a play standpoint?
It's Chaplin by a mile. That's one of your big ticket positions, left tackle. He was the best offensive lineman this year by far. That's a really big loss. Other than that, though, I don't see a real. I think after that, it's like Mose Phillips and Kelly Lawson, maybe. I mean, Mose Phillips is kind of that's a question mark one.
Mose,
years
I think,
left.
is definitely number 2 in terms of the losses. You could say Braylon, depending on how you value offensive line play.
Yeah,
but Gunnar Givens is not moving the needle. He's a guy that never played, and it's a shame because he was a high recruit. Tried him at 2 different positions, didn't work out. Malachi, a long career, a lot of injuries, was a good Hokie. Yeah. We've got talent at running back. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. Stroman, I think, would probably be 3rd or 4th with more. It's Chaplin, it's Mose, who are definitely big losses, and then it's Moore and Stroman.
The combination of Stroman and Mose Phillips, both of those safeties leaving, I think that really hits. Now, again, let's also point out, Pete, we don't know that these guys are leaving.
We don't.
It's become a big thing to go into the portal, test the waters, and come back. That's been a big thing, and I'm not going to say they're gone forever, but I will probably gone. And then I would also say, look, like, no disrespect, but there's no production that Braylon Moore or Kelly Lawson or Mose Phillips puts out there that you can't replace in the portal. Like, you're not losing All-Americans. You're not losing top round NFL draft picks. The portal is a give and take game.
I understand.
And you're going to lose these guys.
You're losing a starter You're losing 2 starter quality guys in the safety room. I know that Stroman had his injury issues and wasn't able to be on the field, but when healthy, he was a starter for us. And Mose was going to be a starter potentially for 2 more years. And so it definitely stings. I understand the idea of, like, maybe they're not All-American caliber, but All-Americans are hard to come by. And
right. I think
and Mose probably would have been drafted had he played out the string.
Yeah. Again, that's kind of why I say Mose Phillips is the one that hurts, because he has that eligibility left and he showed good promise.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like, you're going to lose guys every year.
I know.
And the reality is this was 6-16. And a lot of it goes on coaching. A lot of it goes on coaching. But you can't trot out the same players every single year and expect the same results. That happened We learned that
Yeah, but
this
you're
year.
supposed to develop them, keep them in house, develop them, and then they could potentially win more. And listen, the
Yeah, I
issue with
agree.
Chaplin, we can't afford him. Like that.
Yeah,
That's
no,
just what it
that's
is.
yeah.
Like
I mean, we're
that's to
hearing
be plainly blunt about it. We've heard the numbers being thrown around. He's going to get paid in the millions.
adios.
Like we can't
Go
afford it.
go
So
get that bag.
yeah, like
Yeah,
that's fine.
we've thrown around. I think Whit Babcock even used the phrase, but like Tech has to play Moneyball with NIL. Like
We
Tech has a
do.
de facto salary cap, and if a guy's coming in, hey, I want 1.5, I want 2 milli. Uh, okay, go
And
go see if you can get that
it's a
because
lot
we can't.
harder to pay them too, Sam, when you're not getting a playoff check, which we're
Yeah,
not because we were favored in 10 games and only won 6. Like I'm using this like success breeds retention, which breeds money, which breeds retention, which breeds more success. Like, and we can't seem to get out of our own way to get up to above a mid team to start that ladder. And you're going to lose guys when that happens because other schools who feel they're closer or have deeper pockets are going to come and poach your left tackle, who is one of the better players on the team. And so it sucks.
yeah.
And we don't know the word on the quarterback yet, but this is a good number already. And my concern now, Sam, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I know you got something to say. This O-line thing,
Yeah.
I'm getting
The
really worried.
the issue is with the offensive line more than the players that you're losing. I think it's more of in 2 straight years we've seen them bring in a portal guy on the offensive line. Neither time has it worked. And for me, that's troubling. How many of these guys can you develop in? Like, why? Like, can you get really good play out of Brody Meadows, excuse me? Can you get really good play out of some of these recruits that you've brought in? Lath Ganem, can he come in and play really well? You need those guys to step up. If they don't, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. It's going to look like 2022 again if you can't figure out anything on the offensive line.
Got a question from James. Y'all think the coaches want to clean house at OL and identify it as a roster weakness, or is it Crook leaving? I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't either. I don't think you, of all of the staff moves, I don't think Ron Crook leaving would be up there on the list.
At the same time, oh yes, that's true. I believe that. However, I don't know who's going to
You
be
don't
on the
know.
chopping block.
You don't
If
know. Yeah.
anyone, if more than one,
Well,
I really just don't know, and I don't think anybody does at this point. But you do not want to clean house at the OL when we are already razor thin. Like we're losing the older Moore brother and Caden. We're losing Chaplin, which is almost a guarantee. He could come back, but it's almost a guarantee he's gone. And if you're adding Braylon to that, like we're down to the point where we have 8 current offensive linemen that aren't graduating and aren't hitting the portal. 8, and 3 of them are true freshmen right now.
you play 5 at a time.
With only 2 coming in because we didn't recruit enough either.
Yeah,
And
that is.
so it's getting to a point now where we're going to have to take 4 portal O linemen to have the right amount of bodies. And it's not easy to get portal O linemen.
It's not. I will say too, if this is more of a hypothetical, actually not a hypothetical, rhetorical. That's the word I'm looking for. It's been a long Monday, people. Maybe some whiskey will help me out. Oh, there we go. Let's say you have a guy in Xavier Chaplin, starting left tackle, who's like, "Hey, 2 million. That's the going rate, whatever that number is." If you're a program like Virginia Tech that's really thin across the board at the offensive line and you're losing players to graduation already, wouldn't you rather just say, okay, you're my 2 million guy, you go, but can I bring in 4 500,000 guys? Because I need depth. I need it across the board. You got to play 5 guys at a time on the offensive line. Is that the game you're playing?
I mean,
I
it might
don't
be.
know. I don't think I have enough trust in how NIL and roster management has been done at Virginia Tech the last few years to think that that's how it's going to end up. But that could be the thought process. And I think that's the thought process a lot of programs are going to have across the country.
Yeah. All I know is building up an O-line under a new coaching staff is difficult. And we've had our struggles the last 3 years.
We've had
Penn
our
State,
struggles.
when they were coming off the sanctions, One of the reasons they suck so much with Hackenberg is because they had no O-line. Poor Blackman down at FSU. He had no O-line for like 4 years. And sometimes teams just cannot get out of that thing. And now I'm worried that we're depleting our O-line, or it's getting depleted, going into year 4 of our head coach. And like UVA has had this issue the last couple of years. They might have decent quarterbacks. We don't know because they can't protect them.
This is the like the cackles are raised with the offensive line departures more than the other ones, I would say. A safety, a young safety going and testing the waters to get a bag. That happens everywhere, whatever. 2 senior laden offensive line guys leaving is a
2
is
starters.
not great.
2 not starters great. Walking out the door. So that's concerning. Anyway, we'll move forward. We got a bunch of guys visiting today, tomorrow, all this week. We're putting out offers left and right. We're not going to go into that because it's all very fluid and it's really not worth talking about until these guys commit. But it is exciting to see some of the offers going out because we need players, and we're the more news we get, the more players we're going to need, because I don't think the portal is done in terms of the entries on the Hokies end. In terms of coaching changes, Sam, we don't have any yet. One of our, people in the chat did ask about O-line. I don't know. That wasn't for me because the offensive line coach has already turned over once in Pry's tenure. I wasn't thinking that would be an area that would turn over, but maybe. I mean, everything, as they say, has to be evaluated. Pry and Witt were supposed to meet early this week. I don't know if that was today, tomorrow, or the next day. But once that meeting happens and that discussion happens, I think we'll have some more clarity, at least they will, on what the plan is with the coaches. I don't know if we'll find out before or after the bowl, though. I really don't.
And that bowl's a long ways away.
It's like almost a month away, yeah.
So I don't – I think it would be a mistake to wait until after the bowl to open up that position. That would be a big mistake.
Whatever position it is.
Whatever position that is. I also think you need to you can't rush into these decisions, right? And I think you had a good – we talked about this last show. Like, they have a good signing class. They wanted to keep those guys. I understand that. You
can't rush into a decision, but I think a decision
you have to make it
made right after the Syracuse game. You could have come up with a decision because that's when the season broke.
Yeah, I think if that would have been optimal for sure. I think you cut back to the analogy. You got to cut bait and restring that puppy up.
I mean, we're both of the opinion that some kind of change needs to happen.
Oh yeah.
Whether that's just bringing in an analyst and adding to the staff rather than reducing, something needs to happen.
Yeah. I just don't know if Virginia Tech was going to be able to grab one of these big ticket guys to come in to be a coordinator that would really make the difference and risk losing some of their best recruits.
I understand that.
Like, I just think it's a really tough situation, and
but
it's
they're
unfortunate
content to
because
let
they
half the
shouldn't be
offensive
in
line
this
walk out the door. Like, let's keep the recruits. Let's lose the guys that are starting. So, I understand there's bag chasing that's going on. And I get that. I'm not faulting the players. It's just you don't want to do anything because you might lose the recruiting class. What about the guys we need next year?
I will say, I'm surprised it's the evening of December 9th and we haven't seen a coaching move.
It's insane.
I'm surprised.
It's dumb at this
point. I think I'm trying to rationalize it in my mind.
People are definitely rationalizing since that UVA game, and people are forgetting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty surprising. As far as the bowl game, because I know we want to move on to other stuff, but I hope it doesn't look like the Pinstripe Bowl. I really do.
I hope so too, man.
I don't think it will,
because a lot of Hokies are going to go.
Yeah, and I
should.
really hope it doesn't. I think Hokie Nation, because they're going to be there, they're going to show out in Charlotte. They've stuck with this team through awful years. The fans deserve those guys to play. I hope some of them do. I do have kind of a bad feeling though about the player personnel in this group, because there needs to be, whether it's naturally by, using up all your eligibility or by having those tough conversations and telling guys transfer portal's the way to go. There's going to be a roster turnover, and you just hope it doesn't cost Virginia Tech another season like it did in 2022. Like that's your hope. Your hope is that you don't have a lost season yet again.
All right, that's going to do it for VT Corner. Sam and I will be back next week with some VT stuff, but we're going to finish out College Football Monday, and that's going to be our episode for this week. We still got some good stuff to get to tonight. I'm just saying, in terms of what you'll get from us the rest of the week, we're taking a little bit of a break. It's been a long season, 2 episodes a week for 20 weeks. So it's been a really fun season to close out the VT thoughts and stuff, but we are going to preview the bowl. We're going to be bringing you portal news and all that stuff. We're just taking, basically a few days off. But let's get to the other championship game, Sam, because there was some good action here, despite the fact that I kind of left these ones for later because they weren't close. But how about Scattaboo in the Arizona State game, dude?
Love him.
That guy is a freaking bulldozer.
We talked about this, and you and I both were very wishy-washy on Iowa State, Arizona State. And I think my last text to you before the game was like, that team speed of Arizona State on the turf field, I think is going to mean something. And they're playing so much better. And that's what it looked like. Like they looked bigger, faster, stronger than Iowa State.
And because of that conversation, I took the Sun Devils.
Yeah.
And it was the right move. Because I know one of my favorite handicappers was taking Iowa State. And in every one of those games this weekend, you could talk yourself into a line of logic to taking one of the teams because of how close the spreads were, because of how good the teams were. But at the end of the day, you're right. Like they were playing really well. Iowa State had been wishy-washy. That's a good way to put it. And I mean, damn, it was over like in the first quarter because that run by Scattaboo where he broke like 7 tackles was one of the best runs I've seen this entire season.
It was like demonstrative. It was just an unbelievable run. And he had like 3 or 4 of them.
For 170. 16 carries for 170. 2 touchdowns. Levitt was virtually flawless as well.
Incredible. They did all that without their best wide receiver. Like they play the winner of Clemson, Texas. And I got to tell you, the winner of that game better buckle up.
Yeah.
Because you're going to give a coaching staff 2 weeks to prepare. That's going to be really, really interesting matchup on a neutral field. Credit to Arizona State. I will pat myself on the back for being pro Arizona State preseason. I was wrong about pretty much every other team, so don't get that. But
they hit that win total, and boy, did they ever.
There is still something to a team that just plays hard and has a motivated coach. Like that still gets you way above your talent grade for them. And great job for Arizona State. They deserve it.
In the G5 games, there wasn't a single competitive game. In the Mountain West, Boise sat on UNLV, and it was 21-7, but it never even felt that close.
It's never close. Never close.
I thought UNLV had a chance to pull off the upset. I really did, because they had played them so closely in the first one. Odom had done a really good job of like doing the best anyone's done on containing Genty. But I read this wrong. I just read it wrong because a bunch of you guys were taking Boise, and I don't know, like they just had not looked good. They beat Wyoming by 2. They didn't cover against Oregon State, a team depleted. But when the time came, they nutted up, and their freaking defense shut it down, dude.
Their defense is really good. Like they have made a vast improvement year over year on defense. Maybe this is just who they are as a team, right? Like maybe they're just not a team that is going to blow out the opponent. I think there were some opportunities for UNLV to make this a game. Like I think UNLV was in the red zone twice and didn't get any points off of it. Ended up losing the game by 2 possessions. So I think that's less than ideal. But
I mean, the pass rush was getting home. They had 6 sacks.
Yeah, and they were like milking the clock for most of the second half too. Like they've treated the second half of the season like they're milking the clock on their way to the playoff.
It's
It's
that's
been
that's
really
a
weird.
good way to put it. Genty went for 209, so that helps when you're trying to milk a clock. 6.5 yards per carry for him. His numbers are just completely insane. All of that being said, and them getting through the season with the one loss to the undefeated team in Oregon, do you think they're the worst football team in the 12-team field?
No, I would say
I mean, the committee clearly didn't think so.
no. I mean, I think Clemson clearly has some flaws on their team, right? Like there are moments where Clemson stops playing football.
Yeah.
At SMU, not to pound
And
on the
like think
ACC,
about
but
the
like,
matchup if not that it's going to happen, but like Clemson versus Boise, like that's a nightmare matchup for Clemson.
well, I also just think like you look at SMU, they've played the two best teams they've played this year. They've lost to point blank. Like there does seem to be a ceiling right with some of these teams.
Yep.
Um, what do we think about like Tennessee? They have that good win against Bama, lost convincingly to Georgia.
Save that, Sam.
Okay,
Let's
we'll go
talk
on.
about the American real quick. Army crushes Tulane 35-14.
Felt good.
They were up 21-7 at the half, and it was over. Daly ran for 4 touchdowns in this one. Tulane's offense, again, warm weather team going north. Offense only gained 324, 2 turnovers for the Green Wave. What a season by Army, man. 11-1, only lost to a killer Notre Dame team. I was so mad about this pick because I was thinking Army, but a lot of the Bud Elliott was on Tulane. Who's the guy? Richard Johnson. Mm-hmm. He was on Tulane. There was a bunch of the guys I really trust that were like Tulane's just better, but Tulane just got their butts kicked, and they got their butts kicked against Memphis. And I should have taken that as a red flag. But I thought, I don't want to discount the rest of the season because they had looked so good. Well, that's my bad. Army was what a great story, and I'm happy for him. And that was my gut, and I should have stuck with it.
Yeah, I think Tulane is in a spot where they were a better team than what people thought they were. But again, they lost to the good teams they played. They lost to Oklahoma. They lost to Kansas State. They lost to Memphis. They lost to Army.
And good is in quotes with in terms of Oklahoma.
Yeah. So it's like, again, they bumped right up against that ceiling a few times this year. They did have a good win against Louisiana, who I think we're going to talk about next.
Oh, yeah.
That was before Louisiana was down to their third string quarterback.
Yeah. Let's go to the Sun Belt then. Marshall whips Louisiana. You mentioned it in the beginning, but 31-3. What a game by Marshall, man. Braylon Braxton, which sounds like a made-up Gen Z name for a child, Braylon Braxton, but he was fantastic. 193 pass yards, 66 rush yards. The Herd defense was lights out. Only 256 yards allowed. Huff wins the title and then goes to a downgrade, which I mentioned at the top as well. Really nice season by Marshall. This was dominant, and a lot of the public money was on Louisiana.
Yeah, and I think Marshall's one of those teams that kind of figured it out on the fly this year. They were struggling at the beginning of the year offensively with this new air raid scheme. They ended up landing on Braxton to be their quarterback. He gave them a bit more dynamic feel with his legs. They just kind of figured it out as they went along. And credit to them, they won a lot of tough games. They beat JMU in Harrisonburg in double overtime to get to this game. That's a really good program win. They're always able to get a few really talented guys in the program. So good for them for winning. The Charles Huff thing seems more administrative personality than football.
It does, but when you win the Sun Belt,
you feel like you would say, okay, whatever you want, Coach Huff.
A lot like Willie Fritz wins the Sun Belt. No, I'm sorry, he was in the American. Who just won the Sun Belt?
Kurt Cignetti?
The Troy coach. Oh, yeah. No, Kirk Cignetti. He didn't win, but the Troy coach, Kirk Cignetti, these are good examples. Yeah. Guys that do well usually get upgrades. They don't get downgrades. When you win a championship in year 3 and you've beaten Notre Dame in years past, you usually and he worked at Alabama. This is not like a guy who's like a nobody. Like, why is he going to Southern Miss? Southern Miss isn't a dumpster. Like,
yeah, it's a
that's a career killer. Like,
yeah, weird. Does it feel like he kind of decided to jump ship before the season ended?
Yes, he did. Because now I think he'd have better suitors, and
Yeah.
they were
I mean,
trying to force him out. I think they didn't like him at Marshall. But I asked this on Twitter? Does the whole country not like him? Like, why would Charles Huff not get a better opportunity than Southern Miss? Like,
I don't know. That's weird. But I mean, look at, a program like North Carolina, right? Charles Huff is a DMV guy, went to Hampton.
When we hired Pry,
Charles Huff was up there.
Joe from the Key Play was all over Charles Huff. I liked Charles Huff a lot at the time. Like, there does seem to
be a, you have to do a bit of shaking hands and kissing babies as a head football coach. And maybe it's a personality thing. I don't know. But it's a really weird situation. I think Marshall they'll be fine. They're one of those programs that just keeps chugging along, so they'll be fine.
Curious. They're a well-resourced program that takes football seriously. Like, they're going to be all right, and they're coming off a nice championship. So
as far as this game, though,
hey, that might be our best win of the season, Sam.
Probably, dude. Probably. Louisiana was down to their second string quarterback to start this game. He gets hurt. They're down to their third string. They had nothing left in the tank. So it was just one of those games where Louisiana, unfortunately, because of injury, just didn't have a chance.
All right, let's motor through these last two G5 games. Conference USA, Jacksonville State smacks Western Kentucky 52-12. I moved my pick on to Jacksonville State after discussing with some of you guys. They were playing possum in the week before's game when they lose to Kentucky, Western Kentucky on that long field goal. Huff did play, despite that being a big question throughout the week. 176 pass, 167 rush, 3 total touchdowns. Stewart went for 201 and 3 touchdowns, their running back. This is why West Virginia might want Rich Rod, because this team that offense was awesome and fun to watch.
It's just dominant. They have been dominant all year. And ironically, they started the season, one of the first games of the year. They got blasted by Coastal Carolina on national TV in front of everybody. Since then, they've turned it around. They've been a really good team. So credit to them. We'll see if Rich Rod stays there. I think it'll be a big question mark. He'll be a guy who's wanted, if not for head coach at West Virginia, could be an attractive offensive coordinator guy to bring in.
I mean, he's got to get out of the CUSA. He's got to get out of the CUSA.
Yeah.
That's such a bad conference. It's basically an FCS conference. Yeah. And in the MAC, Ohio spanks Miami of Ohio. The Redhawks. You want to talk about public money? Everybody was on the Redhawks. Both you and I, on a week ago, talked about picking the Redhawks.
They couldn't do anything on offense.
They were awful.
Nothing.
It was like, this pick was burned in the first quarter. They couldn't do anything. It was crazy. I think they kicked the first field goal to go up 3-0, and then they didn't get another point.
They had done that in a couple times at the beginning of the year where offensively they just did literally nothing.
Yeah.
And they did that, and it looked like they had gotten over that. But
Navarro played so well.
Navarro was amazing for Ohio, but offensively, Miami couldn't run the ball. Their leading rusher had 11 carries for 28 yards.
Only 190 yards of offense for Miami, Ohio in the game.
A team scored 38 points, and it didn't hit over 44. So
that's brutal, dude.
Yeah, it is brutal, isn't it?
First MAC title for Ohio since 1968. How cool
they were 0-6 in MAC title games leading into that.
And Albin had lost the last one. Before that, it was Solich, but Albin did lose one 2 years ago. So congrats to him, and congrats to him on the new gig at Charlotte. All right, let's get to the playoffs, Sam, because I got some graphics. I got some chatter here. We'll pull up the rankings first. So everyone can see the rankings if you're watching on YouTube, which you should be because you're here with us live. The only thing I want to say about this is that you'll notice there are 2 teams from the ACC here one of which is Clemson down at 16, who just beat number 10 SMU.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. There's an extra loss there. But they literally just beat them at a neutral site. I don't really get the gap between SMU and Clemson.
I don't either.
It's not just one thing. It's not, even if it was 10 and 11, which it is in the seeding, I'd have a problem with it. But it's 10 and 16. I
don't know. I don't know.
Like
I think
they were trying not to penalize them, I guess, from the previous week.
Yeah, and I think it's also trying to stay consistent with, like, if a team doesn't play, they can't be penalized, right? I think they did a lot of gymnastics in this process. Yeah. Did they get the right 12 teams in? Like, I don't know if they were going to pick between a team that was a national title contender, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Clemson, SMU, like, I don't think those teams can win a national title. So maybe it doesn't matter. But yeah, I don't know. It's
okay. So that's all I wanted to say about this. And Syracuse does pop in there in terms of ACC stuff, which is nice. Yeah. They're at 21 and whatever. But let's go to the bracket, because this is obviously the more interesting thing. Clemson comes in at the 12 because they're the fifth highest ranked conference champ. They don't get a bye, but they do get in there at number 12. Congratulations, Texas. You have to face one of the only teams that's won a natty in the last decade in Clemson. That's a kind of a tough draw, but all of these draws are tough. SMU is number 11. We discussed that, we just said, like, they were 5 spots higher. It's just weird to look at them at 11 and 12 when Clemson just beat them, but they're both in there. This really doesn't matter so much. One of them's got to play Penn State. One of them's got to play Texas. It really doesn't matter, but they're both in there. As for SMU getting in over Bama or Miami, the funny thing was, Sam, in the conversation, why was it all SMU or Bama and not Indiana or Bama?
I don't know. I really don't. I mean, personally, I'll say this. I think strength of schedule is a really overrated thing to look at. The difference between team number 15 and team number 50 in strength of schedule is like 1 game. And it's like 2 or 3 wins between that game. It's really not a lot that throws off strength of schedule. So if you're looking at opponent adjusted metrics, Indiana is up there with the best teams in the country. So Indiana probably deserves to be up there, right? They won all of those games. And part of the reason their schedule doesn't look as good as it could was because Indiana beat all of those teams. All those teams have a loss in there to Indiana. That's part of it. Like, you can talk yourself in circles with this. So
it's so true, because if you look at Bama's opposing teams, 2 of the teams are bowl eligible because they beat Bama. So Bama's like, oh, we played all these bowl eligible teams. The only reason they're bowl eligible is because you lost to Oklahoma and you lost to Vandy. Otherwise, they wouldn't be bowl eligible.
It works both ways. I think
at the end of the day, the 3-loss thing for me, like, I agree with you that I feel like the committee got it right. I understand if you're an SEC homer, you're going to point to the strength of schedule, whatever. Schedules can be strong. And I get that. That's good. You beat a lot of teams that are pretty good. But you lost 25% of your games. Not 10, not 15. You lost 25% of your games. I'm sorry. It's too many. And maybe you should talk to the SEC, who put together this super conference, because that's the reason your schedule's so hard. So, like, I just don't want to hear the bitching. Every freaking coach in that conference is a whiner. Lane Kiffin's been whining for weeks.
Lane
Kirby's whining about going on the road. Dude, everyone plays 4 road games. What the fuck are you talking about?
They played 8 games in the state of Georgia.
Like, that's just, they whine. They just want to whine. He's yelling at his commissioner that he had to go on the road. You had 4 road games, just like every other freaking team. Like, and then you got Saban there too. Let's bring in the former coach of Alabama to ask him if he thinks Alabama should be in the playoff. Well, what the fuck do you think he's going to say? It's stupid.
I don't understand. They created this monster. You wanted this.
It's so dumb.
You didn't lose to non-conference teams that you scheduled. You lost to teams that you purposefully put on your schedule. So I don't know what the issue is. Like Alabama lost to a perennial rival. They lost to a team that they have played every single year since before you were born, Pete.
Thank you for that.
I mean, before I was born, before you were born, before your parents were born. So I don't understand what the problem is here.
Yeah, no,
I do think it is significantly harder to go 11-1 versus a mediocre schedule, I think, than it is to have all of the resources and all of the money and all of the talent and go 9-3 against what Alabama schedule.
I kind of have to agree with that. That's a very interesting way that you put that, Sam.
Because it's so hard to win in the way that
it's very hard to win. 11 games in a regular season is very hard to win. And the funniest thing about the graphic they kept putting on the screen during the selection show was that Bama has this and SMU has this, and the strength of record is this, and SMU's strength of record is this. Well, guess what? The only reason SMU's strength of record was worse than Alabama is because of the championship game. A week ago, SMU had a better strength of record. And so there's just so many nuances that they don't even want to bring up or talk about. And it's a bunch of SEC shills and ESPN trying to, I guess be objective, but they're doing a terrible job. And Nick Saban is telling everyone we should have the point spread decide. If you want to have the point spread decide the playoff, do it before the season because you don't have to play any games to set a point spread, Nick. It's freaking, that's the most idiotic thing I've ever heard. Let's have a point spread. You mean the same point spreads that multiple teams did away with this past weekend? Army was a 4.5 point underdog. They won by like 3 touchdowns. Like the point spread to set the playoff means all the games mean nothing. Like that is the dumb, and that's all based on public perception anyway.
The SEC is grasping at straws at this point. Like they had
a bad freaking year.
And they had a bad year and they beat each other up in circles and now they're crying about it. And I don't this is what you created and this is what you wanted. And you knew this was going to be one of the issues with creating this mega conference is cannibalization. It happens that one or two conferences every year just get cannibalized. And this year it was the SEC. And guess what? You watch that Alabama team. Would they be favored? Like they might be favored betting wise against SMU, but I think I might take SMU with the style of play. What's given Alabama issues? Alabama can't stop a nosebleed on defense. I mean, I look at a team like Indiana, who had dominated teams. They dominated the same competition that Alabama was playing a lot of times by more than Alabama did.
Oh, yeah. Do you think – here's a good question for you. Do you think there's any way Indiana gets blown out by Oklahoma? Because I do not. I don't think there's any way.
There's no shot. There's no shot. And I just – even if they were to even if Indiana goes to South Bend and loses that game by 40, guess what? If you want to cry about you should have beaten Oklahoma. You should have beaten Vanderbilt. You should have.
And I'm sorry to yell. It's just like this stuff, like the point spread thing. Of course, Alabama is going to be favored in a point spread over SMU. You know why? Because the public knows Alabama. It's Alabama. Point spread means nothing. It's all about perception. They're trying to get even money on both sides. Like that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, and Nick Saban's a smart man. And he's been on he's said that in the past too.
Yeah.
And I thought it was dumb then, and it's dumb now.
Yeah. There's this idea that you have to be able to earn your way into this thing, or else it's meaningless if you don't.
It's a mixture. People want the best. People say the best teams, but Reese Davis has said this too. Like, it's not the best teams. It is the best of the most deserving teams. That's what it is. It's a mixture of both. You need to be deserving, and you need to pass an eye test, and you need to be considered the best. But you don't just let teams that lose 25% of the games into the playoff. And if you do, they have to win their conference like Clemson. And Alabama didn't even get a chance to play for their conference because they couldn't beat Oklahoma, a mediocre team. And so let's leave that there. SMU gets in. And yes, we are obviously ACC guys. We like Virginia Tech. And so I understand that the SEC is upset. They can be upset if they want. It's the best conference. And I don't dispute that. But Alabama doesn't deserve to be in the playoff any more than SMU does. And that's
SMU had a tougher non-conference schedule. by strength of schedule than Alabama did.
According to ESPN's metric.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. All right, so let's talk about the bracket. I've got it on the screen. The format is wonky. I don't think this format is long for the CFP because just in its first year, it creates kind of an unbalanced bracket where the top teams aren't necessarily rewarded for being the top seeds. And so you look at these 4 first-round matchups. We got Tennessee going to Ohio State, Clemson going to Texas, Indiana going to Notre Dame, in-state rivalry there. Or I should say in-state game. It's not a rivalry. And then SMU going to Penn State, and kind of a funny juxtaposition in that one. What do you think the hardest round 1 game to pick a winner is?
I think
just
it's
pick a winner, not spread.
I think it's that 8-9 game. And the reason is because I don't know, like, what is Ohio State's mentality right now? And also, like, if you look at Ohio State's weakness on the offensive line, giving up the pass rush, they're going up against a pretty darn good defensive line. And they're going up against a team that has started to play a lot better on offense than Tennessee. Like, that's a tough game to me. Ohio State, they have 110,000 people in the stadium. It's loud. They're not the most win at home program in the country. Like, they do lose some of these big games at home. I'm a little bit the other ones, I feel pretty good about the home team. This one,
I think they're all hard to pick. And all the home teams are favored, to be clear.
Yes.
And favored by about a touchdown, if not a little bit more, a little bit less. I think the second one, I just don't know what's going to happen in that Clemson Texas game. Like, it's the 5-12, so it should, in theory, be like the most clear cut. But Texas didn't play a very tough schedule, and the toughest team they played, they lost to twice.
Yeah. I would say though that, like, Texas has looked dominant and borderline elite a lot more than Clemson has this year. So I'm a little bit curious to see.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. Clemson didn't have a great season, but against South Carolina, they played a strong game.
Mm-hmm.
They beat SMU, albeit with a little bit of luck and some defensive stuff going on. That's what you need. But Dabo's a really good coach. And in these kind of games where everything's going to be razor thin margins, maybe he can get them a win against Texas.
We'll see. Yeah, I think, Dabo, you'd feel good with Dabo on your sidelines going into that game. That being said, I think you'd also, I look at what Clemson's issues have been this year, and I just don't think it's a good matchup for Clemson. Let's flip it. Like, I think if Clemson is let's say if Clemson's the 10 seed and they're headed up to play Notre Dame, I'd maybe feel a little bit better about Clemson. I think I'd feel better about Clemson playing Ohio State even. It's just, I think the matchup wise, this is a really tough matchup for Clemson because this is a team that I think can dominate them on the line of scrimmage. I don't think SMU was able to do that. And
yeah,
I'm a little.
Well, here's the thing though, for me with Clemson and Texas. Texas has not shown a great ability to run the ball due to injury. They've run the ball well in some games, but they didn't against Georgia. And Clemson's weakness is, like, if they had to play Penn State, like, forget it. Clemson's done. Like, they wouldn't have a chance. If they had to play Notre Dame, I think Clemson would be in trouble. I think this is one of the better matchups that Clemson could have got, to be perfectly honest with you.
It is, I think, from a ceiling perspective, I think it is. I don't really know about Texas again in these big games. Like,
I mean, they beat A&M,
almost beat Georgia.
Who like to run.
Georgia. My goodness, I'm sputtering over my words.
You're having a Phillips moment
for sure.
So
I don't know. I think it's a really good matchup for Texas. I also think that if you're Clemson,
win up outright, yeah.
If you're Clemson, you're saying, hey, we get to play the team who doesn't have an elite win.
Yeah. So let's say Tennessee, Ohio State, hardest one to pick. Easiest one to pick, you think, is Notre Dame over Indiana? Or do you think it's Penn State over SMU?
I think Notre Dame over Indiana.
Yeah, that's the Friday night game. First.
And also, I don't know, man. I think Penn State over SMU is pretty locked too.
Yeah. I don't know
Because
what to make of SMU, honestly, man. Like, I really don't know what we're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's move to this other question I got for you, Sam.
Mhm.
Talked a little bit about the first round winners, most likely upset. And
In the first round,
yeah,
I think it is
it's
Tennessee over
Tennessee.
Ohio
Okay.
State. Yeah.
All right.
And I hope that doesn't sound like a cop out taking the 9 over 8, but I do think it's a touchdown spread.
They're all
Touchdown and a
I
half.
mean, they're all pretty
Yeah.
similar. So
I just think it's the one that I think people have slept on Tennessee a little bit. That's a really good team.
yeah, I like Tennessee's odds to win that. And speaking of odds, the Vegas odds to win the whole thing, Oregon is plus 380. This was from FanDuel earlier today. Texas was also plus 380. Did you see that?
That's interesting. I let me look at what I have.
Yeah, pull up what you
DraftKings
got. This
open
this
right
was
now.
FanDuel that I had it from before, but it was Texas 380, Oregon 380, Georgia 410, Ohio State 500, Penn State 550,
Okay.
Notre Dame 850,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when it dropped off because then Tennessee was plus 2,500.
Yeah. So I think DraftKings has the same order there. I think Oregon has to be your favorite, especially with this draw.
They have to play one less game than Texas too. I'm shocked that they have the same odds.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think the idea of having to beat Ohio State twice is a little bit daunting, but I think if I look at their draw, I think they have the best path to the title game, and I do think they're the most complete team.
Oregon has
So
the
it makes
best path.
sense.
They got to play Tennessee or Ohio State. Like there's
But then they get to play. I think they have the best path.
but they have to then they'd have to play Texas, Clemson, or Arizona State.
I think the 3 other teams that are most likely to win the national title are on the other side of the bracket.
So what are those 3 teams?
Notre Dame, Penn State, Georgia.
Interesting.
I think there's 4 teams that really have national title caliber, and I think 3 of them are on the other side of the bracket.
Okay, so let me ask you this: you've got $100. What's your value play for the national title?
Value play?
Value play.
Let me go back to DraftKings. I think.
Are you picking a team that has a buy outright
Yeah.
for your value play?
Yeah, I mean, I think Georgia makes sense because of the coach, because he's been there at 4. DraftKings has 450.
Okay.
I think that's a good play. If you want to go a little bit longer and you want to play some long odds, like I think Notre Dame is quietly really good, but I'm not sure if I bet too much against Oregon right now.
I mean, I
don't
am
know.
salivating over that Tennessee plus 2,500. Like,
It is a little
that seems a little crazy to me. I know they got to win 4 games. I know they'd have to beat Ohio State, Oregon, probably Texas, and then Georgia or Notre Dame.
There was a moment in time where they were undefeated and up 10-0 on Georgia.
Yeah, like
there was a moment.
It's a tough road for Tennessee. That's why it's plus 2,500. But like, all these teams are so close, and of those teams that are farther down the list, I think they have the best shot to win it. So that's why, like, in terms of value, I take Tennessee. If I'm just straight up picking a winner, I think it's hard not to pick Oregon. It's really hard not to pick Oregon.
At this point, I think it is.
But coming out of that other side of the bracket, I'm curious, like, who do you like to be in the championship game?
Right now, if I'm looking at how this bracket is, give me Oregon. I don't know, Pete. I don't know. I kind of want to say Penn State, but I feel like we just saw their best. Like we just saw everything.
But Georgia's got a hurt quarterback. Boise, no one expects them to win a game. Notre Dame could. It could be like I agree with you that Georgia, Notre Dame, and Penn State are one of them is probably coming out of that side of the bracket, but I'll be damned if I know who it is.
I have no idea, dude. And that makes this awesome. Like that makes this
really does
such a cool. If you look at So I run the adjusted EPA, and it's adjusted for opponent, it's adjusted for venue of the game, all of that. Notre Dame, number 2 in the country in that.
Yeah.
Number
Yeah,
2.
you've had them high for a while, and it's like it really is crazy that they lost to NIU, and they really haven't played like the most difficult schedule by any means.
But they've blown
But they
through
just
people.
beat everyone by a ton, and they seem to be improving. So I don't know. I think that Notre Dame has the most legitimate shot at a national championship as they've had in a very long time.
I'd agree. I would not
Despite playing
sleep.
in the game once.
I would not sleep on Boise State with a week to prepare, though.
Yeah.
Getting into the semi, like I would not sleep on it. Their style of play is so different than everybody else. They've been really good defensively. They hung with Oregon on the road. I think they like I would not sleep on Boise State making to the semifinal game.
If
They're not
SMU
going to be favored in that game, I'd take the Broncos.
if SMU beats Penn State and you've got Broncos versus the Mustangs, Ford has to get a presence at that game. They got to get one.
Has to. Huge game for horse girls.
Yeah,
huge.
Big Broncos versus the ponies. Yeah, it's that's going to be.
I mean, I would probably take whoever wins that game. I think I am taking Boise State plus the points.
Okay,
on a neutral field, best player in the country. Definitive style of play. They know who they are. They know how they want to play. They're healthy defensively. They have 2 really good lockdown cornerbacks. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll do it for bracket talk. That was fun. Let's bring up. Hold on a second. Let's talk about Rowback real quick. You guys know Rowback, the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. It's the same polo company that had the VT Commonwealth polo. They've got a whole bunch of polos and hoodies now. There's quarter zips in the Virginia Tech style, but they also have tons of other teams, and they've got lots of good gear from all over the country and just regular golf gear. They have the polos, they have their quarter zips, joggers, women's stuff, tennis skirts. And you can use code 2DVT to get 20% off your order. You're going to want to use that this Christmas season. Load up your cart, use code 2DVT for 20% off your order. Rowback Crave Activity. Sam, I've got a little treat for you here. This is the ACC bowl schedule.
Oh, I don't know. Look at all that bowl money coming into the conference.
Yeah, with 13 teams, I think, that are bowl eligible, 2 of which made the playoff. There are some fun games on here. And I was curious as to, like, you heard about some of these matchups. Which one is kind of tickling you in terms of something you might actually want to watch, despite the fact that we don't know what the opt-outs will be?
There might be 1,000 points scored in Syracuse versus Washington State. Like 1,000 points. That's going to be really fun. I think UNC with an interim coach having to play that game outside in Fenway against UConn, who there is going to treat this like their Super Bowl. That is a brutal, brutal matchup. I'm curious to see Miami's opt-out situation, who ends up playing in that game. I am a little curious about. And then if I'm Ole Miss, Duke is not the team I want to play. Duke is that's the opposite type of program. Ole Miss has been whining and crying about this. Ole Miss hasn't looked good in weeks. They're going to have a ton of opt-outs. Duke is not the team that I want to play in that matchup. So I think there's an opportunity for the ACC to have some really good quality wins in this.
What about that Iowa State Miami? That's Pop-Tarts Bowl, which is always a fun bowl. We'll get, one of the Pop-Tarts killing themselves in the toaster, which was fun last year.
Sacrificing themselves.
Yeah, and I haven't had all the players eat them, which is
real quick. Favorite Pop-Tart flavor?
I think we talked about this with Robert last year. I think I'm a cinnamon guy. Okay. I'm boring now.
I'm wild berry.
The wild berry. You're nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm crazy, right?
No, I mean, I like strawberries. Strawberries a go-to. They have so many freaking flavors now. Like s'mores used to slap pretty good.
S'mores is great. Chocolate fudge, great. Brown sugar cinnamon, that was a great choice, Pete. If Miami's guys play, if half of them play, I think they blow the doors off of Iowa State. blow the doors off of them.
Yeah.
If they
Will
don't
will
play,
Ward play though? Like,
I don't know. Like there might be a push more towards playing in bowl games nowadays
maybe, but
because Colorado says they're playing. Like Travis Hunter, Shador Sanders, they both said they're playing.
nice.
I think we might have a. How many of these NIL deals do you think it's kind of written into?
I hope it's written into a lot of them because it's just more good football that I want to watch. But
I'm curious. I'm curious.
you know what's funny about Miami's quarterback situation is that if Cam Ward decided to skip the game, well, their backup, Reese Poffenberger, already popped in the portal. So, and no one probably knows who that is, but he was in the FCS playoffs last year for Albany, I want to say.
Yes, really good quarterback for
And a
Albany,
good
too.
quarterback at the
Mhm.
FCS level. And that will bring me to my final point of the night, Sam. We've got some football this weekend. We got Army Navy, 3 p.m. at FedEx Field, the biggest dump in the NFL. But Army, 6.5-point favorites, as they should be. A little bit closer line than I was expecting, but it is Army Navy.
I have 3 units on Army -4.5. Hopped on that early.
Nice.
I got some work to do. The win totals came in. They are not good, Pete. I got some work to do. We're playing big plays here. We're
Wait,
going
3
to catch
units is a lot.
Yep, we're gonna win. We're gonna win 3 units on the game. It's minus. I think I got it -115. So
Okay.
this is a Go Army beat Navy household. I am across the river from where they build the naval ships, though. So don't say that out too loud. But yeah,
I think it's going to be a
there's
good one
flat
this
out
year.
better.
It's going to be a good one this year.
Tickets are crazy expensive.
They're so expensive.
200
bucks. 200. When I was looking last time, it was like 500. It was probably come down this week, but
next year's in Baltimore. I think we're buying tickets.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'd like to go. I got to go. All right, so we got Army Navy at 3 p.m. FCS playoffs. There's a bunch of good games. I'm not going to go into them. Maybe we'll cover them next week, but FCS playoffs all weekend. That's going to be cool. And then there is a bowl game this Saturday night, Sam. They're kicking things off with the Salute to Veterans Bowl, South Alabama against Western Michigan, 9 p.m. on ESPN.
South Alabama, Fluff Johnson, whatever his name is, Fluff something.
What is
Fluff?
Yeah, I gotta look.
They're running back. He entered the portal. He's really fun. That's sad. South Alabama's been an up and down team. Western Michigan is a veteran team, but again, kind of up and down in the MAC. So who knows about that game?
Fluff Bothwell.
Yeah. My advice for bowl game betting is wait until kickoff. No. Wait until kickoff and or live bet during the game. I would not place a bet for a game 2 weeks from now or something. I would wait until kickoff, live bet, play it from there.
Bowl games even before NIL and portal were impossible to predict. And now it's so much worse. Like, honestly, like the big ones with the guys being locked in and it being for a championship are probably a little bit easier to pick now than they would have been before. But
agreed.
All right. Last but not least, I am drinking a beer. It's called the Fistmas. That's actually what's happening to us now in the portal. We're having a good old Fistmas going on with the Hokies. But this thing is a ginger and orange peel red ale.
That sounds like a cake that they would make on British Bake Off.
It's fine. Like Revolution Brewing. I believe this is out of Chicago. Cool little can. You got Santa in a barrel hanging out. The Fistmas by Revolution. It's just like they're trying to do a little too much with the flavors. 6.5% alcohol. Don't love it. Probably won't get it again. What'd you get over there?
We're rocking with the Woodford Reserve still on College Football Mondays. This time we are mixing it up with some ginger ale and some lemonade. So very refreshing, very delicious.
Nice.
I need it.
Thanks for being here with me, buddy. We covered all the weeks of the regular season, but we're not done yet.
Crazy.
We're going to do some more College Football Monday, and there's even more opportunities for College Football Monday because we got playoff games to talk about. So we'll discuss the plan for all that kind of stuff, but it's not too complicated for the listeners because it's going to be on Monday. Whatever it may be, you're going to get the content on Monday. So make sure you're subscribed to the Sons of Saturday channel. Sons of Saturday channel on the podcast feed, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube and the 2D podcast feed on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, I'm starting to lose my train of thought. Thomas Train, speaking of which, whiskey sour with Woodford Reserve is the best. Thank you, Thomas, for chiming in at the last second here. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.